Welcome to Lawyers in the House with Motley. Wish you had a lawyer in the family? Now you do. Here's your host, Veronica Waters.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Lawyers in the House with Motley on WSB. I'm your host, Veronica Waters, asking you this question. What is it that going to the gym, going skydiving, going rock climbing, going to the theme park, and going out to dinner can all have in common? They might just be an opportunity for us to sign away our rights. Or is that always the case? Today, we're talking about liability waivers on Lawyers in the House with Motley. A liability waiver, a legal document. Most of us by now have already signed a bunch of them. Do we know exactly what we're doing when we put our names on those dotted lines? Joining us today to talk about these liability waivers and how they affect you and me are two fabulous friends and attorneys from the Motley family of lawyers. We've got Ellen Forrester.
Hello.
Hello, back in the house with us, and Jennifer Fleming.
Good morning.
Oh, yeah, it's a song-filled song day.
Gonna sing all day.
So if you are fans of the show, which I hope that you are, you already know that Ellen and Jennifer have been here before. We had such an amazing time. Ellen Forrester knew from a very young age that she wanted to help people. She wanted a career where she could make a positive impact in people's lives. Tell us a little bit about that journey into law, Ellen.
Absolutely. So first I wanted to be a ballerina, right, as all little girls do. And then I thought I would be the president. That didn't work out. I wanted to be a veterinarian and help animals. There was too much science in that. And so then I realized that I had a gift for, frankly, arguing with people. And the law seemed like a natural progression. So I went into being a lawyer, and I love it. And I love working at Motley. It's fantastic.
How much arguing do you get to do on a daily basis
A
now?
lot.
Yeah?
Quite a bit with insurance companies and insurance adjusters, other attorneys. So it's a great outlet for that.
Now, the last time you were here, did we talk about your Great Danes?
We did.
And now you have news for us.
Yes, the Great Danes they actually legitimately went to live on a farm. They were too big for my little bitty kids, but the good news is we have chickens. And our chickens last week started laying eggs, which we're very excited about.
Yay!
The chickens are a better fit for the 4- and 5-year-old, almost 5- and 6-year-olds that I have at home. So yes, chickens in the house.
Chickens in the house. All right. We should have brought one in for the show. I mean,
Next
lawyers
time.
And a chicken in the house. You know, who's to say? Might work. You know, who's
That's
done
right.
it before? We could be the first. And then Jennifer Fleming back in the house with us.
Hello.
So, Jennifer, you know what? We were just talking, weren't we, about how similar yours and Ellen's stories are, because you also knew very young
Yes.
that you wanted to help people. What was that all about?
Both of my parents were in service. My mother was an educator. My father worked in nonprofits his whole life. Volunteering was very important growing up. And so now I get to help people professionally, which just fills up my bucket. It's such a wonderful thing to help people at some of their lowest moments.
You were talking to me, too, about the fact that you got hired very quick at Motley.
I did.
Like it was sort of a wham, bam, welcome to the firm, ma'am.
I did. So I was living in New Jersey at the time, and I had flown in. It was over 4th of July weekend. I had gone to the beach for the weekend, drove up for the interview, and I was flying out that afternoon. And so they rushed me through the interview process. One of the other hiring attorneys was on a plane on her way back to the office, so they asked if I could hang out for a few. I hung out. And then was offered the job, and it's been wonderful ever since. I accepted and flew back to New Jersey and packed up my things and moved down to beautiful Georgia.
Now, were you the one who was the public defender?
That was me.
Did you ever do any defense work?
I did not. I did one criminal defense trial
for a
managing
trial.
partner that couldn't do it that day. I was thrown into it, and I think I was actually successful, but it was literally my first trial maybe 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And you did public defense.
I was and loved it.
You did love it.
I did love it.
Commonalities?
Lots of commonalities. I think that the biggest one, like Jen said, is helping people at their lowest moment, right? So when you're a public defender, you get to go in and be the person that really cares about the defendant who has been charged with something. We are not all the sum of our worst deeds. And not everybody that's charged with a crime is guilty of a crime. And so it was really powerful for me and very impactful, foundational for me, both personally and professionally, to have done that job for so long. I loved it. And shout out to my Nashville Defender peeps, because I still love all of them very, very much.
I love it. Did you, so you knew that personal injury was the field for you, Jen?
I did. I clerked in family law, and that is a very difficult field to be in, because that's people, they say it's everyone at their worst moment, because what's more personal than your family? And after that, I was thinking, what could I do that I could help people? And personal injury seemed to be the resounding answer. So it was great. I went into personal injury right after clerking, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah. All right. I forgive me, because I'm going to take a step back into the previous show that we did together, Jennifer and Nathan and I, because some folks said I left them hanging, because I talked about Jennifer singing on Broadway, and then we didn't explain it. So the floor is yours, ma'am. Please
That's right.
Fill us in.
Although you may think I am a trained soprano, I am not.
She's an alto.
That's right. I was at a Broadway show, the musical Hair, and at the end, they invited, we were in the first row, and they invited some of the audience members up on stage to sing and dance with the cast, Let the Sunshine In. So that is my Broadway debut. It is the one and only time I have sang and danced on Broadway, but it was wonderful nonetheless.
You know what? If you can only do it once, it might as well be,
Right.
the real deal.
That's right.
So kudos. You have retired.
I have.
Walk of Fame, star on the Walk of Fame. Right?
Yeah, and to everyone's delight, I have retired from my singing career.
Listen, I like you. Don't listen to Nathan. I think you sound amazing. All right, Lawyers in the House with Motley here on WSB. I'm your host, Veronica Waters. And Jennifer and Ellen, thank you so much for being in the house with me. We're talking about liability waivers, this legal contract that we sign and that businesses give us pretty much on a routine basis. Who wants to lay out the foundation for what a liability waiver really is and what it means?
I'll take it. So liability waivers are essentially contracts that you enter into with a business or a facility or some other entity where you are saying, by participating, by buying a ticket, by signing the waiver, there's multiple ways that you can enter into this contract, but you're saying, I agree that if I get hurt, if something happens to me, I will not sue you. Or if I'm going to try to bring a claim against you, this entity, this business, we will do it via one of the ways that's described in the waiver. And so we do this on a very routine basis. It has become, just second nature to many of us, where we go do these things and we sign on the dotted line. And frankly, a lot of people don't even read what they're signing. And that's why it's so important today to talk about this and get this information out there to folks that are listening.
Yeah, you're nodding your head vigorously over there.
Yes, it's true. I mean, we do things every day, and you may not even realize you've signed a waiver or there's a silent waiver, but there are so many activities in our daily lives. I was just thinking about this the other day. Oh my gosh, that's a waiver, that's a waiver, that's a waiver. Every week,
like
I
what?
would say. Riding a scooter is one of them, or going to an amusement park, or buying a ticket to
A haunted
cruise,
house,
haunted house,
cruises.
hayride.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, almost any activity that involves any kind of physicality, or going to a public park in Georgia as well.
Wow. So here's the thing. I am one of these people who takes the paper and I'm going over. And it can be very scary because there are those random capitalized letters, and sometimes they're in all caps, and I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't sound like something I actually want to sign. It's like they're so detailed and long, and it says that neither I nor my families nor my survivors can bring any action, and I feel like I want to just cross stuff out and say, well, not in initial, and well, I don't agree to this part. Yes, I know that if I'm rock climbing, maybe there's a risk in here, but I don't want to go someplace and feel like I can't have fun, because I'm just thinking about, well, God, that you put this paper in front of me that makes me think
Right.
I might not walk out of here at all.
Well, we want you to have fun. We just want you to be aware of the risks involved in the activity you're participating in. We want you to make sure that you're aware of what could potentially happen, and then you need to determine whether that activity is worth it or not to you. Even medical waivers are another one as well. Getting a flu shot, you sign a waiver. I mean, so many things we sign waivers for, and we're not saying don't go have fun, don't do anything fun, don't go to an amusement park. We're just saying you need to be aware of it, and if you are injured when you're involved in that activity, call us at 1-800-LAW-NEED because we should review the waiver and see if it's a valid waiver and if they were actually able to waive the liability in that specific circumstance.
Yeah, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about have I signed my rights away for real once I've signed a waiver. But I want to circle back to something that you were mentioning when we were going down this long laundry list of stuff. I don't think that I've ever signed a waiver when I walked into a restaurant.
So that's an interesting, yes and no. So after the pandemic started, I'm sure everybody, especially in Georgia and in other states, but the Georgia legislature passed a law that you could not bring a claim against a business for contracting COVID-19 in the business. And so there are signs up everywhere now. They're at the grocery store, they're at restaurants, they are at the gym, and there's a big sign on the door that says if you enter these premises, you're entering at your own risk and you cannot. That is essentially a waiver. I mean, it's a little bit different because the legislature has made that a law that you can't. But let's say the legislature had not made that a law and a restaurant had it on the door that you can't bring a claim against us if you contract COVID and you go in, that's essentially a silent waiver. It raises interesting questions about literacy, about language, about accessibility of those documents and things, which transfers to all of these different kinds of waivers. But that's kind of what we mean when we talk about you may have entered into an agreement with these businesses and not even known it.
Yeah, I would think. And theme parks, you said, was another one. Mm-hmm. Like, is it like the sign on the ticket window or something that says warning, be careful, or whatever it is? Or
sometimes, and more often than not, it's on the back of the ticket you purchase. Or if you buy it online, it's normally something you've checked online where, you agree to the terms and conditions.
Yes. Quote unquote, right? Yep. Terms and conditions. It says you cannot proceed unless you check the box. Well, you can click on the word terms and you can click on the word conditions, but most people don't do that. They just click on the box because they think, oh, I'm just buying a ticket to an amusement park, right? And that's where it gets you.
Should I always sign a waiver?
Well, that's dependent. I would read the waiver, and there's no harm in trying to cross it out or saying you're not going to sign it. The risk is the vendor or wherever you are may say you cannot participate in this activity or you cannot enter. So it really just depends on how you feel about the waiver.
Now, I want to ask you before we move any farther, what I can expect a waiver to reasonably cover when I'm signing my name on the dotted line. We're going to get into that straight ahead. We're talking about liability waivers here on Lawyers in the House with Jennifer Fleming and Ellen Forrester. Stay with us. I'm Veronica Waters, and we will be right back. Hey, welcome back to the house. You are in the house, Lawyers in the House with Motley. I'm your host, Veronica Waters, here with Jennifer Fleming and Ellen Forrester talking about liability waivers. If you go somewhere, you are in an activity, you sign a waiver, and then you get hurt, do you still have a case? In liability waivers, Jen and Ellen, what do they cover? What's reasonable to be covered?
Well, we don't know. It depends on the waiver is the answer.
Wow.
You need to call us so that we can find out at 1-800-LAW-NEED. And the other answer is they cannot cover gross negligence in Georgia. So we really need to take a look at your waiver. If you have an accident and you're injured, we'll go through that and see what exactly it is that you are waiving and whether that waiver is actually valid.
Yeah, like how I noticed how you said in Georgia, because this could vary state to state. You probably have seen waivers from different states in the cases that you take.
Right.
And some of them are different.
That's right. I had a case actually in Tennessee where I had two clients who were children who had been injured at a water park, and their grandmother had signed a waiver when she checked into the water park. They were too small to get on a ride, and they were hurt. And when the mom called me, she had already called several other law firms that had just blanket turned the case down. And I said, well, let's get a copy of the waiver. Let's see what it says, and let's go from there. And we were able to get a recovery in that case because we argued that the lifeguard was grossly negligent in that she saw that we got a video actually of the children standing next to the happy otter or whatever with his hand out, right? Where you've got to be this high to get on the ride. And clearly in the video, the children were not tall enough. And
they
the lifeguard,
were under the otters.
They were under the happy arm, right? And so the lifeguard waved them onto the ride and they got hurt. And so the law does vary state by state. Interestingly enough, in Tennessee, the law says that a parent, by signing a waiver, waives their right to go after medical bills because a parent is responsible for the child's medical bills. But a parent cannot waive a child's right to recover for pain and suffering That's different in Georgia. It's different in Alabama. So it's really important to call us. We're a national law firm. We specialize in these things. And so we can look at these waivers and tell you whether you have a case. One thing to mention, too, is take a picture of the waiver or ask for a copy of it when you sign it. Because oftentimes just getting that waiver after you're injured becomes very, very difficult. There's nothing wrong with saying, can I get a copy of this? Or taking a picture of it when you sign it so that, God forbid, something happens, you're prepared. We want people to be prepared.
Can I cross stuff out?
I think you can always try. You can always try. I've done it before, and it depends largely on the day and who's working at the ticket booth, right? Because if you have someone who is working at the ticket booth and they don't really know or they don't really, frankly, care about the waivers, they're just doing what they've been told to do, and they don't notice anything, maybe it doesn't matter.
And sometimes if you cross it out, it says that it will be null and void, but we don't know if that's actually true. So we need to take a look at it if you have crossed it out and if it does say that. I mean, the language could be so overly broad that it's unenforceable.
I may not have signed away my rights. The moral of the story, called Jennifer and Ellen, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, coming up on Lawyers in the House, let's take a look at some of the language in these waivers, go through one and see just exactly what it does and does not do. This is Lawyers in the House with Motlake on WSB. Welcome back to the House, Lawyers in the House with Motlake on WSB. I'm your host, Veronica Waters, here with Ellen Forrester and Jennifer Fleming. We're talking about liability waivers. If you go somewhere, you do something fun, you go grab a meal, you step into a hot tub, you've signed a waiver. Did you sign away your rights? If you got hurt doing something like that, these attorneys from Motlake are here to walk us through it. And I got to give you like a little peek behind the curtain. So what I have here is like this random waiver that I got from like one of these room escape games. And I had them going through this waiver. Can I tell you that we're coming back from break and they're still reading it? Imagine when you're signing up for an event and you're trying to get going. Your appointment time is whatever. You want to stand in line, whatever. Are you going to take the time to read something that's like a whole page long? These are attorneys still reading this very same waiver. I just think it's amazing that we're doing this without a thought, many of us.
That's right. Well, and the other thing, too, is that a lot of this is written in lawyer speak, right? And so even if you were to stop and read it when you sign up, it uses words like indemnity or gross negligence or these sort of vocab terms that you may not understand. And so it's important to read through and try to figure out what they're talking about before you sign it.
That's crazy. Mm-hmm. I'm no lawyer.
Right. And it can be very confusing. Sometimes you have to read it a few times to actually understand the sentence. Or like Ellen was saying, assumption of the risk. I mean, does the regular lay person understand what that fully means? It means you're assuming the risk when you are participating in the activity. You're assuming the risk that something can happen to you. And these are really key terms you need to be aware of. Or, for instance, that your photograph and video and likeness can be used if they take your photograph. And you just need to be aware of that. If you see your face pop up on the internet in their advertising, you may have signed your right away.
Excellent point. I was just the other day about to sign up for an exercise program. And one of the things in the waiver that I had to read, it was online, and it talks exactly about that. You're giving us the right to use your image from here on out with, you don't get any compensation. You don't have any say-so. To the point where I actually I wrote the company and I said, hey, I'm concerned about this. I don't think this is going to be okay for my job. Mm-hmm. Do I have to consent to this? I don't mind sending you photos for progress, but if it's going to be marketing, I don't think I can do it. So they wrote me back an answer and said, not a problem. But I think that's a great thing. Thank you for bringing that up. We're signing away our images.
But good for you. You did an excellent job of reading that and then responding accordingly. If only we were all so smart and so wise, but that's excellent.
Thank you. Doing my little hands emoji. I did that. So let's go through some of these terms for real, you guys. Binding versus non-binding arbitration and waiving the right to a trial by jury. What's this all about?
Arbitration is where there's an arbiter or a third party. It could be one person. It could be a panel of people that usually the company picks, the company whose activity you're participating in. So let's just use the escape room as the example. The escape room picks this panel or this person, and they decide your case. So if you are injured, then you go in front of the arbiter or arbiters to decide what you would be entitled to instead of going to trial and instead of having a jury of your peers decide what you would be entitled to.
Okay.
And that's really important as to who picks that arbiter as well. And I'll let Ellen talk about binding versus non-binding.
Sure. So if it's binding arbitration, it means that you go, the arbiters or the arbitration panel makes the decision, and then you're stuck. That's it. I have had conversations with people who have called in to 1-800-LAW-NEED and who have said, well, I'll just go sue them. And I'm like, well, you can't, because you agreed that you won't sue them. You're bound by this arbitration and by the agreement or by the decision that's made at arbitration. Non-binding arbitration is different. It's similar to a mediation where the decision isn't final, but you still have to start. And like Jen said, if they pick, maybe the company has picked an arbitration company in California, and I'm required to fly from, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, out to California on my own dime, right, to go to this arbitration.
Come on.
So there's lots of hurdles. One thing to point out, though, is that all waivers generally are just for that business. We have to consider third-party liability and third-party claims, which means that there may be a third party that's not the business that's responsible for your injuries. They can't waive everything. So they can't waive negligence or the responsibility of other outside parties.
Okay, so how about, I had a dear friend who was in a zip line accident.
Yes.
And we can get into that. It actually turns out that it was negligence on the part of her accident because she wasn't strapped in correctly.
That's
but
right.
What if her zip line accident, when she fell off the dadgum zip line, had been because the zip line itself was faulty?
Yeah, if the product itself fails, that's a potential products liability case. And so the zip lining company that you go to in the mountains, they can't waive the liability for the company that makes that harness or that zip line. So if that fails and there's a product defect there, you may have a product liability case even though you signed a waiver for the zip lining company. So that may be a way around it depending on what it is that caused your injuries. And I think in the instance of your friend's case, she also signed a waiver. However, there was an out in the waiver because the ziplining company had the responsibility to strap her in properly, and they failed to do that. So that's why you always need to call us, even if you've signed a waiver.
That's
because
right.
Even if you've signed one, you may still have a case.
And it may not be obvious. In the escape room scenario, you may slip on a puddle of water and think, oh, well, I waived my right. Well, what if the escape room people have a company that comes in to clean? Right? And the cleaning company came in and they left the puddle of water on the floor. Call us and let us talk through it and let us investigate it. That's what we do at Motley.
It's interesting because, so my friend had to, and I just, hats off to her because she really had to advocate hard for herself in order to even get a copy of this waiver that she signed. And this is a company that operates in multiple states. She could have just, sort of, I guess, taken her lumps and gone away with these terrible back injuries for the rest of her life, but she kept pursuing it and she wouldn't give up.
Right, and that's important, and that's why it's so important to call us.
All right, let's talk about, I think maybe this goes right into my friend's waiving pursuit of bodily injury and inherent risk. Are we saying, okay, I'm getting on a zip line. I know it's risky because I'm like above the treetops. So if I fall and get hurt, no harm, no foul on you guys. My bad.
Essentially, that is what it's saying.
Wow.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's enforceable. But these terms like I fully accept and assume all such risks, and for the listeners, this waiver is going to be on our website at motley.com, so you can look along and see what we're talking about. But it says I fully accept and assume all such risks, known and unknown. I mean, I'm saying I could get hurt, even if I don't know right now that I could get hurt, and I waive going after you if I get hurt. Another interesting thing that Jen and I saw in this when we were reading is that this one limits your amount of damages that you can recover to the price of admission for your ticket. So you could get $1 zillion injury and only be able to recover the cost of admission to get into the attraction according to this waiver, which is really interesting. Oftentimes I say to clients, injuries are as good as the money that's available to get, to recover for them. You may have $1 million injury, but if you're limited to the amount of the ticket,
like if it's
you'll never be made whole.
$39.95.
Yeah,
Right.
You'll never be made whole.
That's right.
This is incredible. Have you had cases where you had to get around something like that and sort of argue that down?
Yes, absolutely. And that's why it's so important that you read through it so particularly, because this one also says they are excluding gross negligence. And as I said earlier, in Georgia, they can't waive gross negligence anyway. So
Why would
it's
that
nice.
be in a would they know that the law maybe like if this I don't even know where this came from, but
Right.
let's say if it was in Georgia, how can you put that in a waiver when it's against state law?
Maybe they're trying to make people think they're throwing them a bone and saying, oh, but if it's gross negligence, you can still come after us. But at the same time, too, this could be boilerplate language that they've just taken a general contract they've taken off the internet, and then they just put in their name wherever the company's name is and their address where the other company's address is. So that's why it's really important that we read these, because they put that in there. But as we know in Georgia, they cannot waive gross negligence.
It might be. That's a very good point. It could be just a small business setting their stuff up, and it's like they get this boilerplate language from offline to maybe protect themselves. But I wonder how much protection it really is.
Right.
It
Right.
depends.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about. Oh my God, death and dismemberment. Yeesh. Death and dismemberment. That's a lot.
I've seen that for a flu vaccine in
Come
a
on.
waiver. I had a friend who went to get a flu shot, and they gave him a waiver, and it said, I'm waiving my right to sue the doctors, even in the case of death and dismemberment. And you're going for a flu shot. You think, oh, that's so
Who
innocuous.
does that?
Right.
I got a
But-
flu shot and didn't have to sign anything.
Or did you?
yeah, exactly.
But
Did you-
seriously, did you check on a little screen?
Sign
like
pad?
sign this?
I was at my
pad?
doctor's office.
Okay.
Would that maybe be different? I said,
It could
maybe
be,
they're-
and like at
okay,
a pharmacy, you sign on that electronic pad.
Yes.
You sign, and you might be signing something you're not aware of. But he didn't. He told the doctor he didn't feel comfortable signing it. But here's the option: the doctor then made him leave. So sometimes you're not really given much of a choice, and it's either you sign it or you don't participate or you don't get the flu shot. So
That's just what you were saying earlier.
Yes.
You run the risk of not being able to do whatever it is you came to do.
That's right, but you have to weigh the greater risk.
Right.
I hate to be a curmudgeon. There are a lot of things I do not let my kids do, and we get invitations to birthday parties at different adventure places, and I look at the invitation and I say to my husband, "We're not going because I think that's too dangerous." Oh, well, what do you mean? I mean, of course it's not. It can't be that dangerous. And I'm like, some activities are inherently dangerous. And so we just opt out of those. It's not about even the waiver. I make a decision before we even get that far, right? And so it's an interesting question about a flu shot, death and dismemberment. Maybe not, but like horseback riding, zip lining.
What
these
about a
sorts of
petting
things.
zoo or a hay ride?
Right.
How dangerous is that?
I mean, I think it depends.
And sometimes those have silent waivers, like the agritourism statute in Georgia, where if there's something like a horseback riding activity, if they have a sign posted at their main points of entry, you are deemed to have signed their waiver, acknowledging that if something happens to you, you cannot go after them. So
Just by walking in because they had a sign posted. Like
Right.
when we go out to dinner.
Yes.
kind of, but it has to be a
Kind of,
specific activity in the agritourism.
Yeah, dinner's not agritourism,
Right,
okay?
Right,
It
fair. But true. But you're basically acknowledging that the activity is inherently dangerous, meaning horseback riding can be dangerous, right? You could fall off the horse and get a concussion or something could happen to you. So yes, you need to be aware that those things have silent waivers, and you might walk right past that sign and not even see it.
Not even think. So climbing on a horse then is considered like the equivalent of a silent waiver.
So I think that maybe not a silent waiver, but you've certainly assumed the risk. I took a call from a potential client who had gotten hurt on horseback riding. And this person said to me, well, I signed this waiver or I didn't. It's not really, the waiver is not the issue here. But I said to them, well, horseback riding is dangerous. And so there's this assumption that when you get on a horse, you could get hurt. It's the same thing for things like trampoline parks. You go to a trampoline park, that's fun. Horseback riding is fun. It's supposed to be fun. There is a danger. Everybody know, or not everybody, but you should know, or you should at least stop and think, could I get hurt doing this? Yes, horses buck people off. Horses kick people. People break their ankles on trampolines. Kids bump into each other. Very, very common for kids to bump into each other while jumping in bounce houses or trampolines and knock their heads together, stitches, head injuries, all of that sort of thing. It's dangerous.
And we're not saying don't do any of this. You yourself have to determine for you whether it's worth the risk. And for someone, it might be worth the risk to go skydiving, but it's really dependent on each person.
I really think it's important to bring up something that you said earlier in the show. We need to think about going ahead. I need to personally think about if I'm taking my grandnephew somewhere, is it okay for me to sign a waiver for him going somewhere? I think that's one of the things that's going to stick with me after this show is over. Mm-hmm. Just because somebody's in my custody, can I sign a waiver for them? Right. It's something that we need to think about. You can take on your own risk, but can you do it on behalf of somebody else? Still to come on Lawyers in the House with Motley. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. Liability waivers. Our closing argument is just ahead. Did you sign away your rights? If you signed a waiver somewhere and got hurt, that's what we're talking about today on Lawyers in the House with Motley. Welcome back. If you missed any of these priceless legal gems from Motley attorneys Ellen Forrester and Jennifer Fleming, make sure that you log on to lawyersinthehouse.com. Check out our podcast, every place that the best podcasts go to live. And remember, you can always drop us a question anytime at lawyersinthehouse@motley.com. And don't forget, you can see us on social at Motley Law on every single platform. You've been waiting for it all hour long, everyone. The Motley closing argument is here. But first, Ellen and Jennifer, gotta say, this reminds me of one of my favorite movies where one of the characters says, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. Mm-hmm. Because I never hear about any of these liability waiver cases.
Right. And there's a reason for that. A lot of cases when you're involving a company, their settlement agreements involve what's called an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, or or a non-disparagement agreement.
NDAs.
And so that means you cannot speak about the terms of the settlement to anyone else, so therefore you might not be aware of it. And the non-disparagement means you cannot disparage the company, meaning you can't speak badly about them. So you can't settle your case and then go on Yelp and then talk about how X company wronged you and about the terms of your settlement. So it's very common for them to put that in those agreements so that the public isn't hearing about all the things that do happen or could potentially happen.
That's right. It's in the company's best interest to do that.
Yeah.
I understand why they do it. They want, and they do this as a bargaining chip for the settlement. We will settle with you if you will agree not to disparage us or talk bad about us online. Really important at the beginning of these cases that people don't air their grievances out online on Facebook before they've called us. Right? Because that doesn't help your case either. So call us. Let us look at it.
It doesn't help you, really.
Sometimes, too, non-disclosure agreements cannot be upheld, so they have to be legally sound. So there can be an out for that as well. Just like a waiver, it's a contract. So that's also something to take a look at, but it's also something to be mindful of that it might be in there.
Is an NDA kind of its own sort of waiver?
Potentially the clause in the contract.
Wow. All right. So what did we not hit on that you guys thought was important to add? Because I feel like we've gotten so much information here. But what would you say you want people to remember going home?
Don't count yourself out. If you've signed a waiver and you get hurt, you should always, always, always call us at 1-800-LAW-NEED. And the biggest takeaway, I think, for all of this is have fun, but be a really good consumer of adventure. Ask yourself, is this safe enough? Are the risks here worth the reward? It's a risk-reward analysis. Is it worth risking getting hurt to do this? And if the answer is yes, go forth and be merry. And if the answer is no, that's okay too. But be a good consumer of adventure. It's important.
Get a copy of the waiver.
And get a copy of the waiver. You know what? Side note, my friend had to sue to get a copy of her waiver.
That's
right. They were keeping it under wraps. Just FYI. Never give her, never, ever give up.
That's right.
That's right.
All right. Lawyers in the House with Motley. Thank you so much to Jennifer Fleming and Ellen Forrester being here with me, your host, Veronica Waters, on Lawyers in the House with Motley. We will see you next time. Peace out.